Hey, I'm Nick Filardi. I co host with Jason Thielbar on the world's second finest podcast. Every week we talk about 90s Bat books, but we also talk comics, movies, books, TV, both new and old, that we love. What you're about to listen to is an unedited version of that conversation. This is the two read pile. Jason, what are you reading?
I don't know if this is gonna work right with the iPad, but I'm reading Starman by James Robinson and Tony Harris. I do
Nice.
remember, I do remember the book when it was out. I think I'd picked up a couple issues. I do remember it being like so critically acclaimed when it was out. Like a lot of mainstream critics, especially, like really liked it because it was like pretty different, especially for a DC book. And I'm just about to start the 5th issue, which is actually number 4 because it starts with Starman
Zero.
0 because
Yeah, because it's
born
it
out
got
of
booted
0
after
hour.
0 hour. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I just wanted to see if it's still, like, oh, is it still quote unquote good? Because I never really read it. I just remember it. I remember always liking James Robinson stuff and Tony Harris too.
hmm
And which I don't always jive with the especially later on. Tony Harris is like more photorealistic style. I don't typically jive with that kind of art a lot in comics, but he does it really well,
Is he
and
doing is he doing that in Starman this early in the 90s?
it's close, but it's not as refined. It's not nearly as refined
Okay.
as he makes it when he gets to like Ex Machina.
Right, like,
Um
that's the stuff in my brain when I think of Tony
yeah.
Harris.
Yeah, but when you see it, you're like, "Oh, hey, there he is." Like you're just immediately
Yeah,
like, "Oh, that's his." Yeah, of course, because he's not inking himself and it's a bit it's not as like tight, but it's still pretty
sure.
tight, you know?
Yeah,
Um and I was, just like, "Oh, is this going to hold up? I wonder what it's going to be like and blah blah blah." And like almost like immediately I'm like I'm into it. I'm, like, really into it, It's just
yeah.
taking things in really interesting directions. Like, the book starts um, with the main character, Jack, is, one of 2 sons of, uh, the original-ish, I guess, Starman, you
Yeah.
know, who was a superhero who I really didn't still don't really know anything about. He's like a super scientist, so, like, he makes gear and stuff. uh, and devices that can help him fly. And uh, one of his sons becomes Starman. First issue, boom, gets murdered. Just gets, you know,
Holy shit, really?
yeah. Just gets taken out. And his other son, Jack, who's our main character, is the sort of ne'er do well, and he's like the fuck up. And his brother, who became Starman, is like the jock, the pretty boy, blonde hair, like always pleasing dad. And Jack, all he cares about is his quote unquote junk, which Jack
Mhm.
is just a collectibles shop, and he's just always excited about just weird stuff. And it's
That's
just like,
cool.
well, yeah, it's such a, integral part of the character, and even in his, like, inner monologue, he'll, like, make these different references and, like, just, like, loves cool objects and things and knows the history behind all of them, and he has this, like, little shop in this part of Opal City, with all these other, like,
Cool.
little shops that sell weird shit, so, like,
Yeah.
um, it's just a really important part about this character is his interest in like the old stuff and like keeping it together. And it's like it's really it's really like starts off like as like, hey man, like, this ain't your daddy's star, man. But uh not in like a not in a oh, here's suddenly gratuitous violence kind of way, but like, oh no, here's some dark shit. And here's this storyline where like, no, people are gonna die and people are gonna get really hurt and they're gonna be really fucked up by it. And at
Is
the end of
this
this arc, they're not all gonna be great, and there's some things that are gonna be fixed, but like, and they're gonna get the villain, but guess what? It's gonna be really fucking sad when they get the villain.
is this
And I
is
don't
this
want to ruin.
why it's a lot different than other DC continuity books? Like, you made a comment that it feels very different, and is that the
Yeah.
reason? It's because it's rooted in this kind of, like, deep sadness?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it also seems like I remember, at the time, it was a bit later when Sandman finally ended, a bit later into the '90s. I think it might even have hit the early 2000s, maybe 2000 when it finally ended. But I just remember, like, Neil Gaiman having to have, like, all these, like, interviews, having to explain to a comic book audience that, like, yes, stories end. No, I'm not ending Sandman because sales are down. Stories have endings. Yes, I've always had this ending in mind. He's like, I started writing it with, here's the beginning of this tale, here's the middle of this tale, here's the end of it
Sure,
because
sure.
stories end. And there's this great scene in I'm gonna read the whole goddamn series. I had already texted you before the show that I'm probably gonna buy it physically. I'm gonna find some
Yeah, yeah, you were
collected
slacking on
editions.
the letters column because you were like, "I just read another issue
Uh,
of Starman instead."
yeah. Yeah, but there's this great scene in an issue where he had, he had clocked early on in the very first Starman issue that there was this mysterious new, shop on the street, and he didn't even he's like, "Oh, suddenly it's suddenly there." He's like, "I'm gonna have to check that out at some," but then all this crazy shit starts to happen, and then he finally, like, before the l last issue of the arc, he's like makes his way to her, and he's all bedraggled from a fight that he had, but he walks into the
Bedraggled?
shop.
Bedraggled?
Yeah,
Sure,
bedragged.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah.
And he walks into this mysterious shop to, like, find out about it, like, see what this is all about. He meets this character who I think is probably going to be like, seems to be pretty important to the probably the furthering of the story because she's a fortune teller.
Okay.
And just before he's about to leave, um, she, like, sort of like has a vision. And it's this nice big page spread where she's like talking about where she sees him, right?
Mhm.
In these different spots, like, over the years. Cause at every point he's like, I'm not a hero. I'm not a hero. This isn't me. I'm not like a guy that
Yeah.
has a moral
In
compass. And,
in
you
Zero
know,
Hour, they were like, they made him geriatric, the original Starman, and he was like, "I gotta pass it down to my sons." And, like, even in that, in those panels where he passed it on, like, the blonde athlete was like, "I'll be Starman," and he was like, "Oh, yeah, I don't want any part of this."
yeah, yeah, yeah. And but she's like, but this is what makes me excited though too to read the whole thing is because but she, like, lays out where, like, all these like sort somewhat vaguely what these things are going to happen. I'm like, ah, shit. I'm like, all right, so James Robinson just had a treatment for, like, the whole goddamn thing, just like soup to
Yeah,
nuts.
yeah.
Like, here's what I think would be cool, cool things to hit, and here's the idea I have in mind for the ending because I think that that's like when I think about it for half a second, that's probably one of the big reasons um, I had started to pull away from superhero comics was that it just never stops. Like, there's never an ending to it. There's
Right,
never
right,
a final X-Men issue, which on the one hand is great because there's always new stuff to tell. There's always new characters or different ways you can change things. It's fine. But just
right.
for me personally, I just get so fatigued by that kind of thing. And I can only really read superhero books where I'm just like dipping my toe back in for like an arc. And it's like, all right, that was cool. But like, I've except for being a kid, I've never in my life just been like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna read Justice League for, like, years." You know? It's
Do
like,
you
I'll
remember do you remember, our friend, Mike Carroll, who was reading,
yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
ton
Big
of
love to Mike
X-Men,
Carroll.
like yeah, yeah. He was just like, "I collected X-Men as a kid, I'm still collecting them as an adult, I'm just gonna read X-Men no matter what, even if it's terrible, I'm gonna pick it up and enjoy it," and I was like, "I kinda respect that. I kinda
Oh,
respect
yeah.
that, like, Wednesday warrior." He's just like, "This is my thing, and I'm laser focused."
Yeah, yeah, and and I know that that's probably, like, one of the selling points to, about superhero books, especially the,
Sure.
old long running ones for people is that, like, it's always there, and these are the kind of stories that I pretty much like anyway, or I know I can find,
Right,
or it's going to
right.
turn into, a story that you like, and that's that's great, but, like, man, like, stories end, dude.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
like
yeah.
I like an
Is
ending,
the,
you know?
is the fortune teller in, Starman, is that, Madame Xanadu?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm not
I'm curious.
Starman kinda gets to, like, I've talked about it before, but there's like a short-ish list of like my knowledge of like DC superhero characters, and like Starman is like
Sure.
way off of them. So I don't really know any of the
Way,
like
way, way off the reservation. Yeah,
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 yeah.
like even like Green Lantern, like I only really know that like Hal Jordan, there was one guy before him, and then from there, like anything else,
Right,
I'm like, I
right.
have
Yeah, we
no
talked
idea.
we talked Green Lantern on an extended to read pile, and you were just
Yeah.
like, "I'm real in the weeds, guys."
Yeah, yeah, like, if you wanna ask me about, like, anything about Hawkman, I'm like, "I don't know, I know he's, like, an environmentalist thing and has wings, man. Dude, I don't know. There's a lot of these heroes, dude. I can't, like." But I do enjoy anytime I've ever seen a thread I had seen a thread, like, on Twitter of, like, either, like, Mark Waid or Kurt Busiek because, like, those guys are, like, just those type of guys that have all of that. It's like, "Oh, well, let me give you a history about Legion of Superheroes from this volume." When it was,
Yeah, yeah.
and they know like all
In my
that's amazing to me.
experience,
I've so far
when
removed
when I
from all of that.
encounter, other comic creators who are, like, hyper knowledgeable about the DCU or Marvel at large, it's
Yeah.
because as children, they got, like, one of those giant phone book sized, like, who's who in the DCU books, and then
Oh,
just
yeah.
poured over the thing, like, wore that book out, and that's what makes them so knowledgeable about the
Oh,
DCU going forward.
yeah,
I
yeah. I was that way with Marvel, trading cards, which I had a couple of complete
Yeah,
series,
yeah,
and so,
yeah.
like, all those little tidbits of information and stuff, I
Right,
just, like
another
I
another
was the best.
fantastic road sign for, like, the
Yeah.
Marvel universe.
Like, I was so good at who could beat who in a fight. I'm like, "I got the stats, okay? Let me refer you to the power level here." As I pushed up my glasses.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
man, that's
Rad.
like that's that's like once I've probably told you this story a million times. It's like once when, I was down in New York for something, maybe just to hang out with Brian and Emily, but, like, at, Brian and Emily's, place, and, when I was, I was gonna leave to go catch a train to go home, and, a friend of, Brian's was coming over, and Brian's like, "Yeah, we're, 'cause it was right before the last Infinity War was gonna come out. He's like, "Yeah, a
Yeah,
friend of mine, hasn't really seen many of the other Marvel movies except for Infinity War Part 1, so we're watching in, film universe chronological order, all the Marvel movies." And, like,
sure,
that day, they'll
yeah.
watch, the first Captain America movie, and then just kinda, go from there. And, like, she shows up, and I was about to leave, I'm still, like, kinda, like, sitting there on the couch, and yeah, it must have been a mocha weekend because I had, like, yeah, like, a bag full of comic books too,
Sure,
and
sure.
I was explaining something about comic books. I'm like, "Well, it's really not that important that, like, they get it right in the movies." Because she's like, "Oh, like, comic book fan." And I was saying something, I was like, "Well, but in the book," and then, like, pushed my glasses up, like that, like, absent-mindedly, and Brian just, like, started laughing his ass off, and he's just like, "Love that you did that," because I was just like,
We
"Oh, wow."
can't help who we are. Just
It's
can't
yeah,
help
it's in
it.
my yeah, it's in my blood, like, I know what I'm
Yeah,
about, alright?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
come on,
yeah, yeah.
like, I know what this comes off looking like. I just trust me, I know. I can't help it, like, it's all there. But yeah,
Uh,
Starman, I'm very excited to, sort of do what you did with, like, Fate and, like, here's my preliminary,
sure, sure.
opinion on it. I do think you'd really like it.
I
Um
do wanna read Starman. It's on my short list. There's a bunch of stuff on the DC
Yeah.
app that, like, I feel like "I'm gonna get to that, I'm gonna get to that," but, like, I keep having a physical to read pile in the other room that I'm like, "I
Yeah,
also want
yeah.
this." So
Oh, same way.
it's a lot, it's a
Yeah.
lot.
Oh, and I will say, and, like, sorry to spoil this, but what I thought was really cool too is that, like, at the end of, like, this, like, little arc,
Yeah,
like, the original Starman's supposed to be this, like, super scientist, right? And now that his son has, like, Jack has said he's accepted, he's like, "All right, fine, I'll be Starman. I still don't think I'm a hero," but
right.
he's like, I'm gonna have some rules." He's like, "Number 1," he's like, "I'm not going out on patrol. That's what the police are for, okay? I'm not gonna
Yeah,
be doing that petty crap, like, no," he's like, "If
sure.
I'm needed, I'm really needed or if I see someone that needs help, he's like, "Sure, I'll suit up and jump in." But he's like, number 2, because this his dad, the original Starman, supposed to be this like super scientist and like all of his creations, like the staff and the his belt and all that is what gives Starman like his powers and all
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
right? And he's like, "For too long," he's like, "you've just been using your knowledge to create technology to fight supervillains." He's like, "It doesn't it doesn't help anybody with anything. It's just an endless cycle between you
It's a vanity
guys." And
project. Yeah.
yeah, and so he's just like, the other condition is he's like, "You could have made, like, flying cars, so start working on that." He's like, "That's what you have to do when you're rebuilding. I want you to make tech for the world." And I'm like, "Holy
Everyone.
shit, that's such a great point brought up in the
Yeah.
'90s of someone being
Right,
like,
right.
"Hey, why don't superheroes, like, materially help, you know, like, these
Man,
I'm like, "God damn."
the
Like,
Starman book sounds fucking fantastic, to be
yeah,
completely honest. It sounds
yeah, now do you
right
s
up my alley.
yeah, now do you see, like, right away, I was like, "Shit, I think I'm gonna have to buy this, like, physically before I even, like, finish, you
Right,
know,
right.
uh, the series on the app," you know? So,
Mhm.
but yeah, Starman, dude, like, get into it. When you can, get into it. And
I will,
and
I will.
oh, and just one more little thing about, Tony Harris,
For
though. I
sure.
do love it's also really cool I talk about it here a lot, but it's still always really cool to me to see, like, where an artist was, especially when you have a good, like, a bit
Oh,
over
yeah.
20 years, when you have, like, 20 years, and then, like, you see where he is now. It's just so cool to see what's different, what's like the same. Because, like I said, it's not like his ex machina stuff, but you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, that's totally Tony Harris. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
there he is, right
We
there.
talked
You know,
we talked about the one trick ripoff, last pod, and or no, 2 pods ago? I can't remember. Anyway, we talked about the one trick ripoff. It when I start to, like, edit the pods and record them, they start to, like, blur together for me. Anyway,
yeah,
we talked about the one trick ripoff, and, I pulled it off the shelf the other day, and I was flipping through, that, and then I was flipping through, I was looking for Batman Year 100 stuff for the to read pile, the extended one on YouTube to put some art in because we were chatting
hmm
about it, and
yeah,
as a kid, I didn't really see the growth. I don't think I had, like, the visual language in my brain. Like, I hadn't seen enough line art, I hadn't read enough comics to really see the growth of Paul Pope because he's so fully formed, like, at the gate. But then when I was
yeah,
flipping between these 2, I was like, "Oh, he did get a lot better." Like, he is
yeah,
constantly working, and it is nice to see that growth in, like, 20 years' time, like you were saying. Like, I am
yeah,
probably gonna really enjoy Starman because of that, because personally, I felt like Tony Harris got a little too locked into, like, photorealism a little
mhm,
bit for my
yeah,
taste personally.
yeah,
I know people really love that stuff, and, he definitely has his fans. I'm not trying to crap on anybody's taste or anything. Like,
yeah, yeah.
let your freak flag fly, but, like, for
Hey,
me
man,
personally.
I don't like mushrooms. It doesn't mean mushrooms are bad. It just means I don't like mushrooms. It's fine.
Right,
No one's making
exactly,
me eat
exactly.
mushrooms. It's okay. It's like,
But, like, if this is a little looser, if he's working with an inker, I might actually really, really love Starman. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to cracking it.
yeah, yeah. It's really, yeah. It's really, I think, a little bit of a hidden gem at this point,
Yeah.
I don't
Nice,
know how
nice.
much popular play it's gotten over the last sort of, like, 10 years or so of, "Hey, you should, like, check this book out," or,
Right.
or
And
how
also
people still feel
trying to
about it,
find,
if they
like
feel anything about it.
trying to find stuff that's timeless in the '90s, I feel like is also just a really difficult thing to do because so much of it is, like, style over substance and hasn't aged well, but it sounds like Starman really has.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah, a lot of it's just like everybody has anybody who's a comic book fan growing up in the '90s has burned into their mind. I'm closing my eyes and bringing it up right now of the iconic Jim Lee cover for X-Men #1 when they
Oh, yeah,
rebooted, the
yeah.
vault, and like, but I couldn't fucking tell you a thing of what happens in that issue. You know, but the cover looks great.
Cover
The
looks
cover
great.
looks the cover's amazing. I love it. Jim Lee's a
90s,
goddamn legend,
baby.
you know? But yeah, no, but yeah, you're totally right that like, yeah, sometimes like 90s book could be very much there's a lot of it like that. It's like, yeah, like, the wet works like was I don't know, there were mech people or gold. I don't know. It just looked
Yeah,
cool,
yeah.
man. I had the poster like
That was,
and
Pistachio, right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
super cool. I have the toys. I bought a couple of issues. I don't know what's going on. I couldn't tell you one thing about Wetworks. I know
Yeah.
it's fucking rad.
Yeah. Yeah, I know there's big guns and shit, and it looks cool, like, that's about all I'm here for. I'm just here for it to look cool, man. I'm not here
But
to,
yeah,
like
it sounds like Starman is, uh,
yeah,
a actual timeless great comic. So, I'm gonna give it a
yeah,
shot.
yeah, yeah, and it's fun too, it's fun too, I wanna say, it was
Mhm,
like, it's the whole thing, really. I mean, yeah,
mhm.
highly recommend. Big recommendation there. And I think yeah, and you didn't have like, yeah, you were caught up with work this week, right? Did you do
No,
or do you
actually
have a
well, I have been
oh,
tinkering away on a 100-page graphic novel that, like, I don't get paid till I finish. So I've been, like, trying to get the fucking thing out the door, and I'm, like, 75 pages in. Um, but I had read, when I before I had realized that we were gonna do Case of the Missing Men last week, which is an
oh,
all-time
yeah.
banger, somebody in my Discord actually just read it for the first time coincidentally because we were talking about it in the Discord, and I was like, "Dude, it's so good," and he just finished it, and he was like, "Yeah, banger, banger book." But,
Yeah.
before I had realized we were gonna do that, I had read November.
Ooh,
This is by, Matt Fraction, Elsa Charité, Matt Hollingsworth, and lettered by, Kurt Kenny.
I've been
Um,
wanting to read that.
yeah, so I picked up, November. I picked it up digital in a sale. I picked up the first volume. There's 4 volumes. Picked up the first volume digital in a sale, read it, really loved it, and then was like, I'm gonna pick it all up when it all comes out, and told myself I was gonna do that. A lot of time passed, and then I found myself in a comic store, and they had volume 3 and 4, but they didn't have 1 and 2, and I was like, "All right, I'm every time I'm in a comic shop, I'm gonna buy something." So I picked up 3 and 4, and then, got the other 2, online somewhere, and once it was all assembled, read them all. Really, really great. The only thing that my only criticism is that it's hand lettered, and sometimes I personally struggle with lettering. I talked about this with, Honor Among Punks in one of the
Mhm.
extended 2 reads that, that is also hand lettered, and there'll be parts where it's like I just struggle a little bit to read it a little
Yeah,
bit. I don't
yeah,
know. I don't know if I'm more I think that I have a little bit of dyslexia going on, but it's like undiagnosed, whatever, it's fine. Uh, but I do feel like I'm like just a little sensitive to legibility. Um, so that's really and that is like a very nitpicky thing. The only other nitpicky thing is that it's 4 volumes, they're all hardcover, they're 75 pages each, and they're like $17 each. So it's kind of an investment to get the whole thing,
yeah, it's pretty
but
pricey.
you should probably pick up the first one and see if you like it. 17 bucks to get you in the door, not bad. Figure out if you like it and then pick up the rest. It is about it's about 3 women who become, like, adjacent to this organized crime that happens, um, and it's about, this, like, police corruption that's happening where they are I don't wanna get too into exactly what it is because it's featured very, like, Matt Fraction wrote it in a very, like, disjointed way where you kind of only get, like, one small piece. Each of the women in this thing are part of one small piece, like, of stumbling into this mystery. So they're attacking at it from, like, 3 different points. So if
Yeah.
I explain what the mystery is,
Yeah,
then
you're gonna yeah.
I'm gonna end up spoiling it, which is not what I want to do because I do want people to read it. Um, but yeah, it's these 3 different women. One of them finds a gun in the street. one of them is a 911 operator, and the other one is gets recruited by this guy who just like is like, go up to this booth, like read out these numbers every morning. There's gonna be a puzzle in the paper. And this woman's like good with puzzles, good with crosswords. She's mostly our main character. And she has a cripple, and we find out why later in the run. Um, and she's like working on crosswords and stuff. The guy's like, "Look, I'm gonna put a puzzle in the paper every every day or every day, and figure it out, decode it, and
Wait,
then
she
go."
I'm sorry, she has a cripple? I'm sorry to
Yeah, yeah,
derail.
yeah. She has
Or she is
her
crippled.
she is crippled. Like her
Okay,
legs don't work
yeah.
as well. Like she can kind of
Oh, okay.
hobble around. She has those
Yeah, yeah.
canes with the brace on the arm. I don't know what they're
Yeah,
called.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, well, like crutches, they're just crutches,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
they're
just
of a
crutches.
there might be a more specific name, but yeah.
So she figures out these puzzles and then goes to this roof and broadcasts them over wave radio to somewhere else in the city. And then he gives her like $500 a day for that cash. And not only is it about like her doing this thing and she doesn't like know exactly what it is, but she just like takes the money. But then she's like, at a certain point, like having this much cash is a fucking poison more than anything because it's like, how do I launder this money? How do I make it legitimate? I don't have any of the resources available. She's like, I think she's a drug addict as well. I can't remember if she's a drug addict in the past and in recovery or not. But she's kind of a mess. Like even if she's not an addict, she's kind of a mess. So she's spending it a lot at like strip clubs and stuff because she's just like, fucking, I don't know what to do with this money. You know what I mean? So
That's what I
uh
do with all my extra money, all the piles of extra money I make. To the
from
strip club
illegal
I go.
activities, just funnel it
Yeah,
right back into other places where people will not look the other way at a pile of cash.
yeah,
There was an
exactly.
Atlanta episode that was very similar to that, where he gets a little bit of money and then he's like trying to spend it.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and he's trying to act big time, and,
Yeah, but it's like
is
the
that the
only place he can really throw money around is the fucking strip. Like he ends up at the strip club at the end of the episode.
yeah, and then the final scene is him foot racing Michael Vick,
Yeah.
and it doesn't show the race, but it shows him being
Uh,
disappointed, and his girlfriend, like, yeah, the girl like turning to him and going, "It was Michael Vick." Like,
yeah, right.
it's like you're not gonna
She was like,
out like
he already did 6 races. I think I got an edge on him. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
the point is that, if you like books that are, about, organized crime, uh, stuff like that, Matt Fraction written some crime stuff before. He's very, very good.
yeah,
Elsa draws the shit out of this book. Like, if you haven't seen her work before, it's kind of like Darwin Cook, but a little more cartoony, a little more squash and stretch in there. Um, Beautiful, beautiful. Matt Hollingsworth does a limited palette on it that is very, very good. And then at the end, kind of like changes it up in a really smart way. And like I really appreciate somebody who's thinking about the color and then getting to the end and having the color kind of like echo the story and pay off in such a way. I'm a sucker for that shit. Like I'm all about it.
yeah,
Yeah, I can't recommend this book enough. If you're into crime stories, if you're into female lead characters, like this book's got it. This is your jam. Just check it out. At least
yeah.
I hope that they at some point put out a more affordable soft cover of all 4 volumes together so that more people will pick this thing up because I
Yeah,
do think that the price point's a little bit of a stumbling point.
is it an image book? Like, who's
It is
publishing
an
it?
image book, so I assume at some point they'll
Yeah,
put out
they'll put out some soft
some
covers.
sort of like yeah,
Yeah. No,
collection of it.
yeah, no, that's great. I've actually, yeah, I have been wanting to read because I love Matt Fraction. I think his because I haven't finished the series yet, but I love Sex Criminals. Sex Criminals is
Yeah,
great.
X-Men fantastic, yeah.
When the Hawkeye, My Life as a Weapon
Yeah.
was one of my favorite superhero books in a long, long time, and one of the
Oh,
old
yeah.
yeah. And well, and
It's
of course
David
it helped
Adja,
that,
right?
like yeah, David
Yeah,
Aja is a
yeah.
oh
Ooh,
god,
man, I've
that
I've
part.
reread that thing probably, like, 4 or 5 times. There's there's a little anecdote about so that cover for My Life as a Weapon, um, that, like, I think was the first one where he's firing the arrow, and it's kind of like these targets in the city. It's, like, kinda graphic as David Aja does,
Yeah.
and, somebody asked him once, they were, like, at a show or whatever, I remember hearing about this, where they were like, how much did you futz where that arrow was supposed to go? Like, just moving it over a couple of pixels, moving it over this way a couple of pixels, a little up, a little down, like trying to tilt it, like how much did you futz with that before you finalized it? And he was like, not at all, because he had like all the geometry figured out, and he was like, the arrow could only go in one place.
Yeah,
So
it's like when you see,
yeah,
when you see a process video and someone's like, "Yeah, then this is how I created this thing," and the first, like and even though it's like, super sped up, like, the first, like, 10 minutes of it is just, like, grid, 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 layer, grid,
yeah,
grid, grid,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Oh, yeah, that's it. That's how you get."
This person's got a process. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's like, "That's how you get there, kids." Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
but I've always loved his, I've always really liked his writing, and I always really thought that, like, his characters are written so, so well. I think he writes his characters, really in such a solid way, almost like a playwright would, and that's what
yeah,
dialogue feels like to me in his books, and I really
yeah.
love that
Oh,
quality about it. It's this very I feel like they're walking onto a set on stage anytime I've read, something he's written, and it works great in that way of that, like, the dialogue
yeah,
isn't like he doesn't try to go the, like, the Bendis/Mamet route where, like, you have the
it's
dialogue be quick and
bantery. Yeah,
snappy.
yeah,
Yeah, to try to, like, maybe try to, like, mirror real life more often, like, seems like Fraction tries to go with, like, again, more of, like, a playwright, like, mindset of, like, sort of like the characters are, um, the most important, you know?
yeah. I'm
While,
I'm
like
glad you said that because I felt like I was stumbling around trying to explain exactly why this thing is as, like, great as it is,
yeah.
because, like, the crimes that are being committed are almost secondary to you just, like, having, like, a deep empathy with these characters and wanting them to, like, come out the other side of the violence okay, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, like, Fraction really hooks you in with, like, each of these characters and, like, makes them fully realized real people.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, because in My Life as a Weapon, like, I just I bought it because I heard how much praise it was getting, so I'm like, "All right,
Mhm.
I'll, check it out." I had no fucking idea who, like I knew who Hawkeye is, but, like, I had no
Right.
idea who, I'm now forgetting her name. She became
Kate
Hawkeye for
Bishop,
a bit. Kate Bishop. I thought I had when
I
they
think
made
she was new for that. She might have been
oh,
new for
okay.
that.
Yeah, but, like, I, like, immediately but at that point too, her and Hawkeye had, like, already known, who each other
Yeah,
were for at least a
yeah.
little bit, and it was just already had this, like, relationship where he's just, like, annoyed by her, and it was just, like, such
Yeah,
a great like, again, to me, it
yeah.
reminded me, like, of a play where, like, you can open up a play and there's, like, 2 people talking, and one person's just like, "Oh god, would you shut the fuck up?" And, like, you just
Right, they
like,
have
you're
a
in it, and
history. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and you don't have to like, yeah, and it brings that kind of, that that fullness to it that, like you said, that's what grabs you, that's what pulls you in because, like, you're
Right,
really
right.
invested of what happens to this person, not so much the mystery, but what solving the mystery might do to the person, and you wanna see that outcome because
And
you're so sucked in, you start talking about the
right,
person like they're real, you know?
right, right. And I feel like I'm doing a disservice because I'm probably for the YouTube, I'm probably putting up a lot of the art. Um,
Yeah.
Elsa, like I said before, draws the heck out of this thing. Again, extremely expressive characters, and I think that without her doing what she does really well, it's like it's the other half of that equation of, like, Fractions writing them to be, like, you're in there with them, they're fully realized characters, and then Elsa is just, like, hitting every mark with like precision of like expression, um, and like not only that, but like the way that each of these characters live and the environments and like that tells a story in and of itself. It's just like a fully realized, beautiful piece of art. So I don't wanted to like be like, oh, it's all writing, Matt Fraction. Cause
Oh,
like
oh,
Alice is
yeah, yeah.
also fucking knocking it out, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, that's something that, like, again, like, other than his name that, like, when the book was first coming out and I was seeing stuff for it, I was like, "Oh, shit,"
Hmm.
check this out, and yeah, and, like, the art is I have seen the art. It is very, very it's this sort of, like, newer trend I've kind of seen, and, like, I don't know what to call sort of this genre other than, like, crime, whatever, but this sort
Hmm.
of, let's say, like, image book, the somewhere between the, like, Fantagraphics and,
Sure.
like, major, like, the weird
Yeah.
little image book. But over the past 10 years or so, like, I've seen, like, it just seems to be this, like, trend and influence among, like, artists coming up that, like, uh, they've learned so much from past mistakes of, like, other people. Of, like, they've learned
Yeah.
that, like, "Oh, I don't have to be detailed in this way, but if I'm detailed in this way, this is the kind of
Right.
effect that it's gonna happen." So, like, I don't have to
Elsa is
be.
so good at that. So good at like
Yeah.
pointing like pointing the reader where she wants the reader and then delivering those payoffs through the page while like on the flip side not killing herself over like a background detail if she doesn't need it, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like I remember watching something once about, there's this guy, I'm gonna kick myself for forgetting his name, but he's like a legendary cinematographer, and it's this, like, really cool, like, cut where he was giving an interview about cinematography, and he's just, like, looking at the camera, and he's like, "Well, you see right there, you have the wrong lens on, because what you're shooting me with is making me look like this, right?" And he's like, "But you're
Yeah.
talking to me, I'm supposed to be an authority figure, so you're gonna want a wider shot," and then it smash cuts, and he's, like, sitting, like, like, back, and he's like, "See? Now I have more presence," and now and, like, um,
Yeah, it's
I've
like watching
seen.
watching a master
Yeah.
at work, you know?
Yeah, knowing which subtle ways it's like, "Oh, I'm gonna use this
Right.
lens for
Right.
this and light it this way, and then it's gonna give me this kind of effect." It's like, "Oh, I'm gonna make this scene really messy and show a lot in the background because I want
Yeah.
because this scene's about the character being a mess, and so I wanna show that, you
Right,
know,
right, right. In a
whatever it
weird
is." Like,
collision of realities, she, also runs a very great, YouTube channel about process. I don't know if you've checked it out.
"Oh,
Um,
I will?"
but she not only talks about her own process, but will break down how other people handle a page, and she's talked about some David Aja, My Life as a Weapon, Hawkeye stuff about, like, how he directs through the page and, like, why he's doing what he does. And it's really, really great. I'm slightly jealous of her YouTube because she gets, a little bit of a help because I think her boyfriend or husband is in, production a little bit. So, like, she gets to do what she does, they shoot it, and then he puts it together in, like, a really polished professional way. Um, it's gorgeous. Her YouTube is worth a follow for sure.
Oh, I'm totally gonna check that out, especially because I'm
Yeah.
back on the drawing train lately, so
Yeah,
that'll
yeah,
help. I think that'll
yeah.
yeah.
I don't have any, extended, stuff. Like I said, I've been swamped with this graphic novel, but yeah,
Yeah.
looking forward to it. Um,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
looking forward to the next 2 read because I think I'm gonna finally crack those mage books. Uh,
Oh, fuck,
yeah,
yeah.
there's I'm on the I guess this is extended to read, but, I wanna crack those mage books, and then in another Discord, there's somebody who's been making a lot of noise about Concrete lately, and I'm like, "Man, should I be reading Concrete? Maybe I should be reading Concrete."
I've uh,
Have you don't like Concrete? You're not into it?
I I don't have a strong
80s
memory of
black and
it.
white boom, man. How could you not be into it?
I think I'm into it from the weirdness of it,
Sure.
but
It is
from what I
extremely weird.
yeah, and from what I remember of it, it's just like so text heavy, like,
It is
so
text heavy.
text
It is
heavy.
extremely text heavy. Yes.
Yeah, and which, like, I'm like, it's like I wanted to pick up a comic book, not a book with, like, not an illustrated novel. Like, an illustrated novel is cool,
Yeah.
but, you know, th this ain't a comic book, man, you know?
Sure, sure.
Like, I mean,
I've I've
not going that far, but you
I've
know,
definitely
that's at least
opened
my memory.
opened some comic books in my life where I've opened it and the first page is covered in text and been like, "Nope," just, like, close it, put it back on the shelf, like
Well, like, listen,
so
man,
I don't know, maybe I'll try some
I
concrete, see if I can
look,
get over that stuff.
like, I like
Okay.
regular books, I like, I loved fucking Classic Illustrated, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, but man, when I order a cheeseburger, I want a cheeseburger, you
sure,
know?
sure.
But
Yeah, I
yeah.
get it, I
But
get
yeah,
it.
concrete, I'll read anything and I'll check it out. Maybe
Sure.
I'll
Yeah,
completely
yeah,
do a
yeah,
180, who knows? Like,
sure.
yeah.
I've always been it's one of those books that we're of a certain age where, like, we started reading comics, like, in the '90s, and there's, like, the echo of, like, the '80s black and white boom, where there's, like,
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
stuff that a lot of, like, weirder fringe things that happened in the '80s that I'm, like, kind of aware of, but not actually aware of. Like, I've
Yeah.
heard whispers, and I'm very curious about that kinda stuff. Also,
Yeah.
um I picked up a concrete trade paperback that was reprinted in color, and I guess, Paul Chadwick's wife did a lot of the color in them,
Oh,
and it's
cool.
extremely, like, Euro-inspired color,
Yeah, that's what I
which
remember about
I feel like
some
is pretty
yeah.
unique, especially for that time, so I'm like, maybe give it a shot." I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me know. Let me know. Be interested. I'd
Yeah,
be
yeah.
interested.
If I pick up some concrete, I will definitely bring it to the to-read pile.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Cool, man.
Yeah. I think, that's all I got. You
Yeah.
got any more? You got any more?
No, no. How do people get in
Okay.
touch with you, Jason, when they tell you that you spoiled Starman for them and they didn't need to know all that stuff about Starman? I don't know.
Okay.
You didn't really spoil Starman. I don't know
Only the f
why I'm
only the
laying it
first
on you.
arc. Only the
Yeah.
first arc, man, you
You
know?
only read 5
Uh,
issues and it's
yeah, yeah.
long, long running. Yeah.
Yeah, of a book that got canceled 20 years ago.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, you're
Um,
really you're ruining my experience of this 20-year-old book.
yeah, how
Jason,
dare you?
you spoiled Citizen Kane for me, you son of
Yeah.
a bitch.
Yeah, you did it was the sled? The fuck is that shit? People can find me, at King of Black Acid on Twitter, at
Mhm.
World's Second Finest on Twitter, that's with a number 2 in there, and if I don't let another week get away from me at worldsecondfinest.com. WordPress shouldn't be this hard, and it's just the fact I just need to do it. But worldsecondfinest.com, King of Black Acid on Twitter, World Second with the number 2, ND on the Twitter machine. And, yeah, that's where you can find me, yell at me, get into
I gotta
arguments.
send you the logos too. Like,
Yeah.
I'm slacking
Oh,
on my own.
eh, eh.
I'm consumed by this graphic novel. Once I get to the other side of it, I'm gonna come up for air and do all these
L
things that I was supposed to be doing along the way.
Listen, the minute I start making enough money that I can, off of this podcast that I can, like, take myself out to, like, a nice dinner, just myself, then I'll start caring about that, like, making promises and
Whoa,
keeping
whoa, whoa,
them,
whoa,
but
whoa, whoa, whoa. We're supposed to be making money on this podcast? Whoa, whoa,
I'm
whoa,
saying
whoa, whoa.
if if I think we might owe more people money somehow at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
I think it
Somehow
might be, like, deep in debt,
we're
bad interest
operating
rate
at an
percentage.
extreme loss. Yes,
Yeah,
you're correct.
yeah.
You can find me at linktree.com/nickphil or nickphil on Twitter, or join me in my Discord. I'm far more active in the Discord now than I am on Twitter or Instagram or social media at all. Kind of losing my taste for social media, but you can always find me, chat me up on the Discord. There's actually a World's Second Finest room on there if you want to talk
Oh,
about the
cool.
show or talking about what you're reading. Come to the comic halls and show me what you bought. Show me what you're reading.
Nice.
Because I've definitely taken some recommendations from them and brought them to the to read pile. So, yeah, come hang out.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks as always for listening.